Welcome. My name is Stephanie Hofmann. I'm a professor and joint chair in international relations at the European University Institute. And today I have with me Danielle Flonk, who is assistant professor in international relations and politics at the Faculty of Law at Hitotsubashi University in Japan. Danielle, thank you so very much for joining us here. So I would like to talk a little bit about your expertise on internet governance and also autocratic regimes. And so my first question really is, how do autocracies approach norms of governing the internet and using the internet?
So there's two different groups that we see, generally speaking, in the academic debate. On the one hand, we have liberals, and on the other hand, we have sovereigntists. So liberals mainly comprise of like Western states, like European Union, United States, and they kind of see the internet as an opportunity. They want to push for like private self-regulation, and they don't want to bring internet governance to intergovernmental institutions in most cases. Then the sovereigntists mostly comprises of autocratic states, and they mostly see the internet as a threat. So for them, it's very important to have like digital sovereignty, and they want to bring like decision-making procedures to intergovernmental organizations. And these groups basically conflict over two dimensions. So they conflict over institutions and they conflict over norms. So with regard to the institutions, basically the autocrats want like states to be sovereign and that they have an equal representation within these organizations. And they want to like shift regimes to institutions where they have a bigger say. So mostly they want to shift like multi-stakeholder like organizations, like decision making from multi-stakeholder organizations to intergovernmental organizations. Let's say the United Nations or the International Telecommunication Union. And then with regard to norms, they mostly promote the concept of information security. So like liberals would mostly promote cybersecurity, and sovereigntists are in favor of information security, which is a way of like defining cybersecurity in a way broader way. So you define it in such a broad way that it kind of includes any information in the political, economic, social sphere. And these are the kind of norms that they want to promote.
Thank you. So right now we discussed autocracies as if they're like this uniform, homogeneous group of actors who are all pursuing same kinds of interests. I mean, have you in your research observed any kind of variance, any kind of differences across autocracies, or are they rather pursuing, from what you've seen, very similar ways in the ways that the internet should be governed?
So I think there's a difference between, like, for instance, China and Russia. So in the case of China, you see that the internet by design is way more centralized. So there's like internet choke points that they can control. So it's easier to censor the internet in China than it is in Russia. So for Russia, like technologically, it's more difficult to censor the internet. So then they have to depend more on like policies or international norms, those kind of things. At the same time, a lot of these countries also exchange expertise. So they have trainings together, or they have like joint security operations, things like that. So there's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is very unfortunately called RATS, which is the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. And they collect data, they have a database, they have joint security operations. So we see a lot of exchange of expertise. I think finally, one thing that's very particular about China is that China establishes a lot of international organizations, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS, like the World Internet Conference, the Belt and Road Initiative, right, the Digital Silk Road. So I think that is kind of like particular for China, that it like very proactively tries to contribute to regime complexity.
That's super interesting. So like, I mean, you already outlined a little bit like a question. I wanted to ask more about the different visions they have about the internet and international organizations, how to link different organizations. But so you mentioned Russia and China quite a bit. I mean, would you actually say that these are the countries who are the most proactive in trying to push how the internet should be governed? Because I mean, I just want to flag here, my questions might suggest that all autocracies are by definition also autocratic when it comes to the digital domain, which is not what I wanted to suggest, right? So some are not, some do have authoritarian practices, some do not, and not all are equally proactively pushing for different visions when it comes to the international sphere. So would you say, looking at various autocracies that actually pursue authoritarian practices, that China and Russia actually are the most proactive ones?
It's not just, I think, about the authoritarian practices. I think it's about like how they behave in international organizations. And in that regard, I would say like China and Russia are the most important norm entrepreneurs when it comes to these norms. And I think this is super interesting because if we think about norm entrepreneurship, we think about liberal actors promoting liberal norms, right? So we think about NGOs promoting human rights norms. But we actually also see that autocrats promote like bad norms, so to say, right? Like norms on internet censorship, for instance. And China and Russia are very much on the forefront of this. And they do this in regional organizations and in international organizations. So in regional organizations, it's mostly about like socializing like-minded states, like in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. In these organizations, it's mostly about convincing, like not even convincing, it's about like socializing other states into like one mindset around information security, right? So like praising their behavior, giving them compliments, things like that, doing like joint operations. Then in international organizations, it's the discourse of like China and Russia really changes to like more persuasion. So instead of socializing other states, like they're never going to socialize the European Union into doing internet censorship, right? So what they have to do, they have to persuade like less like-minded countries from like to support their positions, right? And they do this mostly via securitization. So securitization is a big one. That you see that in cybersecurity, often like even even democratic states can be convinced, right? Yeah, so, but China and Russia are like the biggest, like we see this in the data. If we look at the country contributions in the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts and the Open-Ended Working Group, we see that Russia and China are like the biggest like contributors, like in terms of like statements that they give in speeches.
Danielle, thank you so very much for helping us think a little bit through how autocratic regimes, or some autocratic regimes, make use of different international platforms to pursue their own visions when it comes to internet governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.